I have to imagine that of all the videos that I've been putting out regarding the Granblue Fantasy vs. Rising cast for patch 1.5, this has to be the most anticipated character. Nier has been dominating the metagame talks of Granblue Fantasy vs. Rising ever since that she's been released, and despite having received nerf after nerf to her kit, she's still remained the best character in the game over time. Now, Cygames and Arc System Works have finally put their foot down and have approached Nier from the stance of reworking her Love's Redemption stock mechanic to change the way that the character functions. And before we get into the rest of her changes, this is what we need to explore. Nier has been defined as being a puppet character who summons a doll of death in order to wreak havoc upon her foes. The idea behind stocking up this doll was with the Love's Redemption gauge, these 13 hearts that you see under Nier's life bar. Each one represents a potential special move that Death could do. Now, whenever you use it normally, the gauge doesn't go down. However, you can cancel the special moves into each other, and by doing so, you'll be able to spend one of these stocks. Nier had primed this next move on the card that you see on the screen. With the 4 special moves at Nier's disposal, there basically wasn't really a cooldown to them except for the little bit of time that you needed in the combo. You could use the EX version of the moves as well to gain enhanced properties and be able to cancel all of them together. With the right sort of setups and combo timing, you'd be able to effectively loop these versions of the moves as well to maximize your damage. As Nier lowered her Love's Redemption stocks, she'd be able to increase the damage of her supers. From 3,800 damage to 5,200 damage raw. That's a massive increase. With the super scaling like that, Nier basically would be put in a situation where if she was able to run her offense for most of the game, she'd likely get the opponent into a situation where they were going to be on death's door, pardon the pun, and then be able to cash out into a higher damage super to close out the round once she got down to her final Love's Redemption. This made her incredibly strong at closing out rounds, especially after she was spending all of her Love's Redemption stock to run her game plan. There was 2 intended weak points for Nier to have with this mechanic overall. That was going to be if the opponent could check Death out on screen and hit Death between moves, they'd be able to put Death on cooldown for a few seconds. However, usually this particular cooldown was not long enough to basically give the player the rewards they had earned. The other way was to get it so that Nier's love stocks would run out by the end of the set. She would do this by canceling into all of her moves or spending 2 Love's Redemption stock on the EX move to have stronger effects for them. Once that was the case, Nier could no longer access any of her Skybound arts, nor could she even summon Death, and this was for quite a period of time. The problem with this weakness is that Nier didn't enter it often enough. Death was a very powerful puppet, and Nier's damage with Death was crazy high. On top of that, Nier had access to mix-ups in the games that many set-play characters would kill to have in Granblue Fantasy vs. Rising. True high-low mix-up, and the damage afterwards basically allowed her to loop it into itself. That combined with other setups that basically removed countering a Raging Strike from the option of arsenals made her a character that really played by her own rules. In my own belief, if a Nier player ever ran out of Love's Redemption stock in a round, one of 2 things was happening. Either the Nier player was not optimal enough with their conversions to kill the enemy fast enough, or the enemy was having an amazing round on defense and was able to guess right on most of the 50-50s, thus forcing Nier to waste stocks on mix-up that didn't lead to a hit. Seeing that Nier was hardly entering this power trough cycle of hers, Cygames and Arc System completely reworked the Love's Redemption stock mechanic in order to make it so that she is going to have to contend with this weakness often. For starters, just even using Death at all costs 1 Love Redemption stock. Before, your light and medium summons were free for Death. Now each move uses a stock. Furthermore, canceling these moves uses an additional stock. So the first move will use 1 and the next move will use 2. Furthermore, each EX move now uses 2 stocks by default. And canceling an EX move into another EX move uses... It's also worth mentioning as well that all of the ultimate skills of Death now will use 2 stocks of Love's Redemption. Great. And additionally, all buffered skills now deal 80% of their normal damage, reducing Nier's overall damage output. These are all knock-on effects to slow down her offensive capabilities. As a means to compensate for the higher amount of Love's Redemption stock that Nier is going to be spending, she's able to regenerate it earlier as well. Whenever death disappears, she is put into the state where she cannot summon death at all, and she can't use death until that gauge completely restocks. This happens whenever death is resummoned by using 5U. And as you'll notice, the less stocks that you have, the more the timer needs to regenerate in order for you to get death back. For each stock of Love's Redemption that you use, death will have to wait for 1 whole second for that gauge to recharge. This will scale all the way down until you get to your final point. However, if Nier uses all of her Love's Redemption stock, then death is even on a longer cooldown than just 13 seconds. I counted about 15 seconds on that particular transition. Additionally, if the opponent can hit death while they are out, they will force this regeneration of Love's Redemption stock by themselves. This is massive, and I mean massive, for Nier. Additionally, if the opponent is able to hit death while they are active, not only do they delete death and force this cooldown, they also take out a Love's Redemption point as well in the process. Additionally, if the opponent hits Nier with a super while her Love's Redemption is regenerating, during the super flash and the cinematic, the timer freezes. Basically, there's not really a way for Nier to cheat around this cooldown on death. She has to wait for the time in-game seconds in order to get death back. To help compensate for this regular power trough Nier will face, her Love's Redemption will now recover some of the Love's Redemption gauge on hit. It seems like it takes about 1 second of recovery time off of it. The charged version of the move will recover more gauge. That being said, I'm not really quite sure how Nier is going to be landing a fully charged version of this move without death. But when she gets a hit with death, she'll be able to link into this pretty easily. Being able to end her recovery time a little bit earlier after she gets some hit with death, I think is going to become a new gameplay loop for Nier. All of these changes, Nier going into this Love's Redemption cooled down far more easily whenever she unsummons death, whenever death gets hit by the opponent. The increased expenditure of her Love's Redemption stocks. Any move now just taking up a stock, chaining into moves, taking up a stock and another stock, using EX moves, draining 2 stocks at first and then 3 stocks for each subsequent cancel. Now, Nier is going to be put in this power trough far more often within a match as it is. I feel like because of this, Nier is going to have to rely on her own buttons, which are still good buttons, mind you, to contend with the opponent and then bring out death at safe opportunities to try and run her offense. She needs to play more defensively with death, lest she loses that important puppet character and has to fight on her own for an extended period of time. This is a crazy brilliant rework that I think that Side Games and Arc System Works have been able to plan out to actually give Nier this intended state of weakness and to reward players who are able to check death by being able to have guaranteed time where they don't have to worry about the puppet. They can just go in and run their offense. As if that wasn't enough, there is one final change that needs to be mentioned as well when it comes to Nier and death. Whenever death is out, Nier cannot use Raging Strike. This is a crazy change to give. Now, Nier is only able to use Raging Strike when death is not summoned. This already does a lot to make sure that there's not going to be any sort of tomfoolery with death and using a Raging Strike to set up an unblockable or a hard to dodgeable or anything like that. Despite the fact, too, that they've already made a couple of changes that I know of that have hurt setups that existed in the past. They really don't want Nier to be messing around with a guard-crushing tool while Death is out, and this severely limits the amount of mental stack that she's going to be adding in her pressure sequences with Death. There's a couple of button-specific nerfs to look at as well, namely with Death Summon. Nier's far-standing M and crouching M all have their range reduced. This is while Death is out. When Death is back within Nier, she's going to use these different normals, as you can see. And these are some pretty good buttons. This is what the hitboxes of far standing M and crouching M with Death Summon looked like before. It feels a little subtle to me, but it's there, I suppose. Additionally, Nier's crouching M has his vertical hurtbox expanded upward, making it easier to poke out against a neutral. Before, this would be what it would look like. This is it now. A crazy noticeable difference. Additionally, her crouching U with Death Summoned had his forward hitbox and hurtbox shortened. Nier's losing a lot of her first-in-class normals, it seems like, in terms of range anyhow. Additionally, all the ultimate skills have reworked properties right now. Before, if Nier used one of these ultimate skills, Death would effectively fly out for the ultimate skill and then return to Nier.
Great.
Now, Death will stay out on standby, and you can cancel from these ultimate skills into other versions of the skills as well. This sort of doubles down on the puppet aspect of the character while giving Nier more potential rewards off of ultimate skill, but it also puts Death at greater risk since Death stays out now. It's a little bit different, but I'm excited to see what Nier players are going to be able to cook up and how this will change their overall game plan with the character. Now, we're going to be going into various moves of Death, and we're going to be seeing that there's a slew of nerfs happening all around. For starters, all versions of Fatal Waltz with Death have an increased hurtbox. This is really hard to visualize, so you're going to need a hitbox viewer to see through it. Additionally, the ultimate version of Fatal Waltz, Death will now slow down on block, making her less likely to whiff. Know that the does not change the parameters on hit. This is a nice little change, and don't forget, since you can now cancel this as well into follow-ups, this will have plenty of utility to explore. This is how Death would move on block in Fatal Waltz Ultimate. A little faster, as you can tell. Now for some misfortune nerfs and changes. This has been a controversial special move from the game's inception. This was an armored skill that on launch could be chained into follow-up moves. Nier could go for a reversal, stopping the opponent's offense, and then put them under her Okizeme and Vortex pressure. It was absolutely insane. They removed the ability for this to start combo sequences with Death, making it far more practical to deal with. However, despite all these various things, it's still been a crazy tool, and it's been used in various setups where the Nier player would basically be able to threaten a Raging Strike, and if it connected, the opponent could not Raging Strike back to deal with the guard break if Death was priming a medium misfortune in the background, because that would actually absorb the hit. I got an example from Twitter for this. This was a little video I did on this particular setup some months ago, namely after CEO that he did against Nitro. So we get the hit here off of 2M, right, and we go for the full combo. And after we set up the side swap and we do the medium reverse, Death reverse, the dummy is actually set, or Death, I should say, is set to do a medium misfortune to get the super armor. What happens there, then, is that if you do get the Raging Strike to hit, which is probably pretty expected because you're looking for low, you're looking for high in this situation, right? You're not really looking for the Raging Strike mid. If you do get that hit, the medium misfortune actually absorbs the opponent's counter Raging Strike, and then you get the situation where you're plus 17 in the defender's face, and you basically get a reset combo that starts with an extra 20% damage minimum because you took away 2 of your opponent's brave points with this sequence here. Pretty disgusting stuff to do to a fellow Nier main there, Zippy. I suppose out of fear for wanting to make sure that Nier players would not find another setup that would take advantage of the Armor of Misfortune, not only did they remove Nier's ability to use Raging Strike while Death was out, they've taken away all of the armor from all versions of Misfortune except the ultimate one. It's the end of an era, really. Now, if Nier wants to be able to have a reversal, she's going to have to rely on using her SBA gauge. There are a couple of buffs that take place when Ultimate Misfortune is used, though. The startup is reduced from 12 frames to 8 frames, so it's on par with other Ultimate Reversal skills. Unblockable skills can also be stopped with this reversal, and there is no more game pause when the armor takes effect. This was a means for Cygames and Arxis to try allow a player to recognize that they were triggering Death's armor and then react to it. So now they're just not really messing with that at all. Of course, you don't get any follow-ups with the death due to the cinematic hit on the Ultimate Misfortune here, but Nier, again, is just going to be thankful to have at least one way of being able to use a reversal, even if it is gated behind meter. In return for losing the armor on these versions, they can now all be used to start a chain. This will give Nier some of her old combo routing back with the character. There is a nerf to all versions of Ominous Turn, where Death's rear hurt box has been expanded while active. Again, I'm not going to really be able to show a concrete example of this. I would recommend finding a hitbox viewer to compare the two before and after. Light Ominous Turn has one small nerf to it. The recovery's been extended by 4 frames, so on block, if Nier doesn't cancel into a next buffered move, instead of being -2, she's now -6. So to keep that in mind. Death Reversed also has an increase in Death's rear hurt box being expanded. Again, I'm not going to really be able to show this, unfortunately. The medium version of Death Reverse now causes the foe to fall backwards on hit for 32 frames. This is a pretty cool buff, I would think. Before on hit, it would launch the opponent into the air. Nier will appreciate being able to do a grounded sequence before she has to deal with launching the opponent and scaling the combos limit. When Nier uses Pain to summon Death, the launch height has been increased, allowing for some more links. Before, you could basically combo only into Misfortune, and in the previous patch, you weren't able to get anything more off of that starter. Great. As an example of all the possible follow-ups you could have tried for. This is what the follow-ups look like now. The Misfortune buff means that you can use this more reliably. Ominous Turn still doesn't work. And Death Reversed also doesn't work. Those are examples of all the normal versions of Death's attacks. Misfortune is arguably enough in this circumstance, but I think it's also worth testing for yourself if you have any pickups and follow-ups that didn't exist before with the EX and Ultimate versions of Death as well. Part of Nier's core set play before, when she had Death active, was using the aerial Pain with Death out there to then create a true high-low mix-up situation. I'll go ahead and set up an example real quick. Nier would effectively set up at the end of the combo by having Death primed to do a medium fatal waltz. While Death was primed like this, Nier's jumping U would become this attack. This normal that would change her trajectory and pause her falling time. This move also hit overhead and had an 11-frame startup as well. So this basically meant that she was able to build setups where, with this move, she threatened same frame high and lows that the opponent just had to guess correctly on a 50-50. Courtesy of going to YouTube, I'm going to have to give the Shinzo here a shout out for posting the concept of a high-low mix-up with Nier here. This would be the setup into the combo, the jump in, and there's the old JU to get the overhead. You were then able to get conversions off with Death as well. You could alternate this with an empty 2M as well. That would be your low mix-up option, and again, you basically have Death do all the follow-ups for you. That form of the high-low is effectively gone for several reasons. For starters, you can see Nier no longer pauses her trajectory as she's falling down anymore. The startup has also been reduced from 11 frames to 8 frames, which changes the timing. Furthermore, this move no longer hits as overhead. You'll also notice as well that when she does go for this version of Pain, she recalls Death back to her card as well, meaning that if Nier even tried to use this, Death no longer just comes on out and works and picks up more. This has been completely reworked as an aerial tool for Nier to use to try and regain some of her love's redemption after she gets an open setup on Death, I would feel like. In light of all the reworks happening regarding Love's Redemption and its mechanics, World of Death and Love, her install super, has also been changed. For starters, it's now permanent upon activation, so once she uses this move, it's going to be active forever. Additionally, the SBA recovery gauge penalty has been reduced from 5 seconds to a single second, so she can immediately start building up meter again, much like how we saw with Siegfried earlier. The main purpose of this now is that if she ever has the Love's Redemption gauge recovering, her health gets consumed to make that recovery faster. It's about 63 health per frame. So there's a possibility where Nier players could go into this super to try and force a round to go back in their favor because they need death right there in that instance. We'll see what kind of experimentation this does get. It has to compete with her high damage supers after all. There was also a bug fix with her Super Skybound art where if you're canceling multiple times before the active frames, you would get the cancel version activate. That since has been removed. Just going to mention that there. Don't think we need to break that down any further. Now, I'd imagine that after going through these changes to Nier, many of you would assume that this is a dead character, that she is finally gone, that she is trash, no one is ever going to play her again. I don't think that is the case. There is a fundamental rework going on here, and while the character certainly is weaker because she has lost a lot of tools, she still has some things that she can play with, and there are going to be dedicated players out there labbing these options to find what can work for the character now. She still has access to mix-up, of course, using her Dash M, for example, to go for overhead play. That's one example, courtesy of Made Jumpy. We're also seeing players starting to lab out her 5U in order to make sure that they're able to regenerate death faster to get around the Love Redemption cooldowns. Pretty cool self-sufficient route. The main reason why I point to that couple bit of tech that's been dropping out is that Nier is a puppet character. By design, she's supposed to be a little trickier to figure out than other characters. There was always trouble brewing, though, where within the first week of this game coming out, people figured out that the puppet character was pretty strong. That was a sign for the worst, because if it takes a week to figure out a puppet character and to realize that all the things that they can do are very strong, the game is going to be in for a problem. And it was, arguably, for several months while she reigned supreme as the undisputed best character in the game, despite various nerfs, adjustments, and all kinds of tweaks to her kit. Personally, whenever I watched Nier, I felt like I was watching a character from another fighting game in Granblue Fantasy vs. Rising. She could play the same strike-throw game that most of the cast relies on, but she also had access to setups and mix-ups and pressure sequences that no other character could really match to any sort of degree with her. Now it feels like she's finally in the mortal playing realm with the rest of the cast, playing Granblue Fantasy vs. Rising. There's still plenty of time to figure out what potential setups there are with her, how you can circumvent this weakness, and how you have to adjust her game plan overall. And I think that instead of being the top-tier character where she's going to run the same game plan and the same mix-ups that trivialize the entire cast, she's going to have more of a meaningful time trying to play to this unique identity of the puppet character that she has. Someone who has death on their side, and they must keep up this relationship with death by ensuring that they don't get exhausted with their Love's Redemption stocks. I know a lot of people will be dropping Nier because she was the top-tier character that did this, this, and this, and now that she doesn't do those things, why even bother in their minds? But there's going to be some players, such as Elsa, who are going to ride it out with Nier and see what the character can do. This is a good character that is going to take time to unpack once again to see what tools remain to her. In the immortal words of One Piece, stop counting what you have lost, instead count what remains to you. I think Nier is going to have a little bit of a hard time, and we might not see too much of her, but perhaps something else is going to come on out, and we're going to be able to see what this character can do in this current version. Don't get me wrong, she's weaker than she was before, but I also don't think that, like Zato in the thumbnail that I have for this video, she's been nerfed so badly that she can't even play Granblue Fantasy vs. Rising anymore. I think she finally has to play Granblue Fantasy vs. Rising now, and I'm interested to see where that will take her on her journey next.